Central Floridians are being taken to the new remote ICE detention center in the Everglades. Supporters say it's a necessary part of illegal immigration enforcement. Critics call it inhumane. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. That Immigration and Customs Enforcement migrant facility, which has been dubbed Alligator Alcatraz, was built in 8 days to detain thousands of immigrants for potential deportation. The first of them arrived at the beginning of the month at the facility. Yesterday, immigration rights activists filed a class action lawsuit alleging detainees are not being given access to legal counsel. Some Central Floridians say they have family members who have ended up at the ICE detention facility without any notice. And then there are reports of unjust treatment and deplorable conditions like being fed food with worms, extreme heat, and broken toilets. I spoke to family members of people who have been detained there, and some asked that we only use their first names because they feared harm or retaliation. JP lives in Orlando and owns a small business. The 37-year-old from Brazil is represented by Miami-based immigration attorney Regina de Moraes. She says her client came here legally in 2022 on a tourist visa. He entered through customs at Orlando International Airport, later applied for asylum, and was granted permission to live and work here for 5 years while his case is pending. Last year, he was arrested for DUI. De Moraes says JP was detained in Orange County at a probation hearing last month, taken into ICE custody, moved to different facilities in the state, and then transferred to their detention facility in the Everglades last week. Despite repeated attempts, she could not reach her client. De Moraes says legally, JP does not qualify for mandatory detention and is not subject to removal. They spoke for the first time on Tuesday after he was moved to a different detention center in South Florida. Throughout this entire process, his sister, B, who also lives in Orlando, said she frequently didn't know where he was being held. Attorney Regina de Moraes and JP's sister, B, joined Engage. We talk about JP's detention and new developments in his case and bond hearing. First, they share how JP describes the conditions at the Everglades Center, dubbed Alligator Alcatraz.
He says it feels like the individuals who are working at the detention center at Alcatraz were just picked off the streets, as if they put an announcement and just came off the streets because nobody has any clue what they're doing. But that they're nice. They're being nice to the detainees. They feel bad. The electricity goes off all the time. With the electricity going off, the toilets back up because they need electricity for the toilets to function. The floorboard is wood with wallpaper on the floor. They're like cages. He feels like he's in a zoo. When it rains, the water comes up, seeps up from the floor, and inundates the whole cage system. What else do you remember?
He said he has no food for 2 days, and he said people who works there, they're not training the people, so even they treat the guys really good there, but they scared.
What even led to JP's arrest and detention? Where was he? What was he doing?
He was coming back from work, but he also got arrested for a DUI. So based on the DUI charges, they picked him up from Orlando jail once he closed those charges up on June 26th is when he finished his criminal case.
Okay.
So they picked him up from Orange County jail.
So does legally he even qualify for detention right now?
Immigration detention? No,
Yes.
he does not. So he entered with a tourist visa. So for him to get a tourist visa, he had to go through the State Department, U.S. State Department down in Brazil for biometrics, fingerprints, and an interview. So he did all that in order to get a tourist visa. Then he landed at the Orlando airport and he went through Customs and Border Protection to be allowed into the country. So he's legally in the country. He then filed for asylum. He has not been interviewed on his asylum. Because his asylum has been longer than 150 days, he's authorized to request employment authorization documents, which he got. It was granted. It was granted for 5 years. The law for immigration detention says that a person needs to be convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude in order for them to be subject to mandatory detention. Or the person needs to have a conviction for several drug offenses, or gun offenses. He has no drug offenses, he has no gun offenses, and a DUI is not considered a crime involving moral turpitude. He's not subject to mandatory detention. He's not even subject to removal.
How did you find out he was taken from the Orange County Jail down to the detention facility in the Everglades?
His sister can answer that. I only found out through his sister.
Because he called me all the time. I always look through the website to see where is he. But the last time before he goes to the Alcatraz, I'm trying to find him, and he disappeared for 3 days. So I have nothing information, not at all information about him. So after these 3 days, he called me and he said he was in Alcatraz Alligator.
He was at the Orange Blossom Trail for the ICE office. He was there again for several days, and they were waiting until President Trump and DeSantis had cleared their visit at Alcatraz before they were able to bring the detainees in. So they came and picked him up because Orange County could only keep him for 72 hours. If ICE didn't come and get him at Orange County, then Orange County would have to release him. So this is the little trick that they're playing, that they go around taking them out of the Orange County, putting them in ICE office for 2 or 3 days, then putting them back in Orange County so the 72 hours starts all over again.
Regina, can you speak to your efforts to speak to your client prior to now, and what happened today with the release? Was that expected?
I was completely taken aback that he was transferred from Alligator Alcatraz to Chrome. I
Chrome is
was
another
happy.
facility in South Florida.
Correct. Chrome is the main ICE detention facility in South Florida. It's been around for 30, 40 years. It's called Chrome Service Processing Center. They have a court, an immigration court inside Chrome with 3 dedicated judges full time. There's a trial attorney, which is the equivalent to immigration prosecutors, physically at Chrome. So they have regular ICE attorneys there. Detention and removal is there. It's a huge facility. So I was happy that he was moved to Chrome because at Chrome, I know how attorney visits work. I know I can see him 24 hours a day with very little inconvenience. Just taking my driver's license and my bar card, I get to see him. And I saw him super quick. Prior to this, I had emailed all the detention officers at Chrome to ask to see my client at Alcatraz. I'd also used the email that the Florida legislatures gave out to the journalists last week. Never got a reply on that. I sent a copy of my bar card and my license to show that I am an attorney and that I do have a client pending there. I sent them what's called a G28. It's a form that us as attorneys, we sign off that we are representing a detainee or an alien. I sent all that, never got any reply back. I didn't have any issue seeing my client today. I didn't have any issue filing for the bond yesterday. And within 2 or 3 hours of me filing for the bond, I got the bond hearing notice and I got the hearing for the 24th. I'm hearing other stories of attorneys going physically to Alligator Alcatraz and not being let in.
Regina, there are people listening to this or someone reading about this who might say this is what should happen. Finally, someone is doing something about the immigration problem here. What would you say to them?
Every administration prior to this has executed on removal and detention of criminal aliens. Bush, Obama, Clinton, Biden, they all have executed and followed the law. And I agree with it. The law is there in order to remove people, in order to detain people. The difference in this administration is the lack of humanity and the violation of due process. This administration is not taking into account the individual's immediate family members, whether it be a mother with an order of removal and a young U.S. citizen child or medical issues. They're not taking any of that into account because President Trump has stated that he's going to deport 1 million people. So now it's just about numbers. The law gives ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, CBP, Customs and Border Protection, Border Patrol officers, it gives them discretion. Even though the law says you may or you shall detain ABC, it gives them discretion. Trump is not allowing them to use discretion because Trump wants numbers. So I am not against enforcement and detention. I am against the lack of humanity and the violation of due process.
You've been doing this for several years. Have you ever experienced something similar to what you're dealing with, trying to represent someone being held at what they are calling alligator Alcatraz and going through this?
Never, never. We have had enforcement initiatives where they apprehend non-criminals, but then they do what was called catch and release. So get them, process them, see who they are, check out their criminal history, their immigration history, and then if they're not subject to mandatory detention, put them on an anchor monitoring, put them on reporting to ICE on a regular basis. They've done that in the past, but I've never seen it, this lack of humanity, that even ICE agents who I'm friendly with feel horrible for what they're doing.
A question for you, B.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want people to understand about your family and your brother?
I want my brothers come back. Here is just me and him. He working hard. We help a lot of people here. They treat us like an animal or worse than animal. So it's too sad when I talk to him on the phone and he start to say history from another people who's in jail with him. So he talk about the guy, he left the kids at the school and he's go to work, and the ICE go to the construction and take everybody to the jail. And the guy worries about his kids. So we don't do nothing, just want to work, pay our taxes, pay our rent, the car and everything. We don't do nothing. So now it's like I'm in jail too because I'm scared to go out, to get my money, to pay my rental, and to do everything. It's a really bad living with like scared all the time. Sometimes my friends say, "Hey, let's go to Ringana to go to the restaurant or do something." I say, "No, no, just I'm leaving home to get my money in my pocket and in coming back. That's all." Because I'm scared. I'm scared because he's there already. I'm scared because I have nobody here, just me and him. Now I'm by myself. Now I need to go to the church and ask for the food bag because I don't have it.
B had just mentioned hoping she can afford the bond for her brother. And
Correct.
you got a bond hearing for JP next week. What is next for him? What do you expect to happen there?
I will advocate that he's not a danger to the community, that he's not a risk of flight. Obviously, he's not subject to mandatory detention because his conviction for DUI doesn't make it so. And the judge is going to have to do a balancing test and use his discretion whether to release him or not. I'm hoping that we get $5,000, $7,500 bond, that his sister, along with his community up in Orlando, that they can post it. They can post all of it, or they can use a bondsperson. And hopefully he'll get released. Once he's released, he'll have another hearing with a judge in the non-detained setting, and I'll have to transfer that to Orlando. And then we'll see what happens with his asylum. We'll see what happens with his case.
That was Orlando resident B talking about her brother's detention and his lawyer, Regina De Marias, a criminal deportation defense attorney. They're not the only ones questioning conditions. I also spoke to an Apopka resident named Maria about her family member being held at the new ICE detention center in South Florida. The circumstances are different from the case we heard about earlier. Maria says 5 years ago, he immigrated to the United States as a minor to escape gangs in El Salvador and now holds a valid work permit. Recently, he was arrested for domestic violence, and the charge has not been resolved in court. Maria joins Engage to advocate for his rights and due process. While the details of this case are quite different, you'll hear similar concerns about the Everglades facility.
I feel scared and so upset too because I know that building is not safe. It's made from, wires and plastic. They built that thing in 8 days. It's not safe for nobody. It's inhuman. No, it's not safe for the human. It's it is building like for cage for animals.
What have you heard from your family member there? What has he told you about what's happening?
Well, he say when the light going off, it feel hot. It's very hot because it's plastic and human. That's what say it feel hot, and sometimes he can sleep because it's too hot. But when the lights going in the day, and he don't know it's a day or night because he don't see the light. You know, so just for the little hole the plastic have, he knows sometimes there's a little light outside. Otherwise, he don't know what time it is or what date it is. Nothing say they don't have no medicine, and he shared with me. He say that the people they take care there, they complain they don't have no medicine for giving to the people. And one of the time he say somebody died in there, and if I know somebody died, I say no, I don't know if somebody died in there. Yeah, some people, a couple people die, and I mean I'm just scared. When all those mosquito, they give it, he's gonna be sick, or everybody can be sick with those mosquito bites. I'm just scared, and I feel I feel for his health and his mental health, you know, and that's what I worry right now. Hispanic people, they are afraid right now, and because they hunted the people, like they look like they hunting the persecution, and every little mistake right now. I'm afraid that people call the police when they have a criminal situation. Right now, I'm afraid because I don't want to call the police if somebody isn't documented, and I am not sure, and I put in dangers, and I don't want to call it. I am afraid.
Maria is also a member of the Immigrants Are Welcome Here Coalition at Hope Community Center. Later in this show, we'll talk to Hope leaders about changes to Orange County's jail agreement with ICE. Some lawmakers are offering a different assessment of conditions. Shortly after a bipartisan group toured the facility on Saturday, Florida's newly appointed chief financial officer, Blaise Ngolia, spoke about what he saw. The Republican state senator's district includes Sumter County.
They walked through the food prep area. It was very orderly. It looked like a regular prep kitchen and an industrial commercial prep kitchen. They had all the food lined up. The food actually smelled amazing. We walked by, and it looked amazing. It smelled amazing. And the conditions, they have an outdoor facility for the detainees for recreation, air conditioned, and there really wasn't any issue whatsoever with what we saw.
U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem oversees ICE and was asked at a press conference in Tampa Saturday to respond to complaints about conditions at the Everglades Detention Center.
Alligator Alcatraz is held to the same standards that all federal facilities are, and in most states and in other jurisdictions, federal facilities are upheld to a higher quality of standards than what some state and local jurisdictions have. So any issues that were there have been addressed. It's a fantastic resource for us to be able to utilize in order for a detention facility to repatriate people back home to their home countries. And what I would say that Alligator Alcatraz is a state-run facility run on our behalf, but we're incredibly grateful for the partnership that we have with Florida.
The Florida Department of Emergency Management oversees the Everglades Detention Facility. I asked the agency about its role in the operation and response to criticism about limited access to legal counsel and conditions for detainees, but did not receive a response. As we've heard, family members of detainees and their advocates share a very different characterization of what's happening to Central Floridians in South Florida. Orlando attorney Josephine Arroyo says her client, being held at the Everglades Detention Center, was brought from Mexico to the U.S. as a child in 2001 and legally protected from deportation under the DACA program.
He arrived in 2001, so I believe he was probably around 13 years old. He came from Mexico He has resided here in Central Florida and New Jersey, I believe, for most of his life. He does predominantly speak English. He is bilingual, obviously, but most of the time I'm having conversations with him in English, which is rare for most of my Hispanic immigrant clients. He has a commercial driver's license, so a CDL. He was employed here. His employer wrote a letter on his behalf that we've been, submitting in terms of immigration.
Can you tell me about the circumstances under which he was detained? Where, by whom, what was he doing?
It's a little bit complicated, but last year, 2024, he did get stopped for driving while license suspended. He was only issued a citation at the time. Typically, in a criminal citation, you then have a mandatory appearance. He was not arrested at the time of receiving that criminal citation. They did schedule a mandatory court hearing, which he missed because there is record in the docket which shows that that notice was not delivered to his address. So at the time that he missed that hearing, the judge issued a capias, so a warrant for failing to appear at that hearing. This whole time since last year, he's had that warrant. Fast forward to end of May of this year, 2025. He was stopped by an Orange County officer, which ran the tag after noticing a broken rearview mirror, I believe, which is what is stated in the arrest affidavit. And that tag showed that he had a warrant out for his arrest from Seminole County. So obviously he was stopped. He was then detained at that time. When he got into the jail, he was issued a hold by ICE. After the warrant was served, he was then given a bond. He posted that bond, and then that triggered ICE coming to get him. He was transferred from Seminole County Jail to Orange County Jail. It seems to me that Orange County Jail is a kind of holding place for immigrants that are going to be taken by ICE. So as soon as he got to the Orange County Jail, very shortly thereafter, he was picked up by ICE. At the time, he was told he was being taken to Miami, but instead he was taken to Alligator Alcatraz, and he arrived in Alligator Alcatraz in the early mornings of July 5th.
Have you been in communication with your client since he was placed at that Everglades detention center?
We spoke to him on that Tuesday through the three-way call with his brother, which is on a recorded line. And so we have spoken to him various times after that when he calls, but it is on a recorded line. I have not been able to schedule a visit to see my client. Alligator Alcatraz is not allowing attorneys to come in. They are making us go through obstacles to try to schedule visits. We have been asking for a meeting and a visit so that we can have our attorney-client confidentiality in these meetings. He has a right to counsel, and we kind of been getting the runaround. That's a whole nother thing that we can get to, but we have not been able to meet with him in person, but we have spoken to him briefly on the phone.
What has he told you on the phone about the conditions?
When we talked to him last week, he advised us that he was finally able to take a shower that day. So that had been 4 days since he was able to shower and bathe, that they keep the lights on 24 hours. So that's obviously very difficult for them to get good sleep, that the toilets weren't really working well. And many times they were flooded and kind of floating with, feces and urine, that he was finally able to call more on Tuesday because there was only 3 phones in his cage. In that cage, they house around 30 detainees, and only one of the phones was working. But when we talked to him on Tuesday, he said that all 3 of the phones were working, that it was extremely hot in there because the air was intermittent in terms of it operating. horrific amount of mosquitoes, that the food wasn't good, that there seemed to have been someone who may have gotten food poisoning one of the days and was taken out by ambulance and never returned. That I think it was only until this past weekend that they were able to kind of have like some recreation outside. I believe that was right before the lawmakers came that Saturday.
What is next for you? What's the recourse for your client? Is deportation a foregone conclusion here?
No, he does not have a deportation order, and that was also confirmed by an ICE officer to him. We have already filed a motion for bond with ICE. We just got a response saying that we now need to send it to the Miami facility. When we sent that request to the Miami facility, Miami told us to send it to the South Detention facility. So there seems to be some miscommunication or confusion between the two facilities there. We will file that in court once they file, if they file official charges against him in immigration court. So then that would be the recourse there. We believe he's being unlawfully detained. So there could be another motion that we do also in immigration court. And if he continues to be there, they don't let him out, then our other recourse would be to file a petition for writ of habeas corpus in the federal court.
Josephine Arroyo is managing partner of the Arroyo Law Firm in Orlando. There's more ahead here on Engage. Amid growing calls for some local counties to end their agreements with ICE, other agencies say that partnership is essential to safety. You will hear both sides. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Still ahead, a new Unity Corner welcomes visitors at Martin Luther King Jr. Park as a hub for community reflection. But first, this week, Orange County commissioners agreed to renegotiate with the federal government how ICE uses its jail. On Tuesday, commissioners talked about the Intergovernmental Service Agreement with the United States Marshals Service and an addendum that would have Orange corrections officers transporting ICE detainees to sites outside of the county, like the one dubbed Alligator Alcatraz that we've talked about today. The current agreement allows the county jail to hold ICE detainees until they're transported to the Orlando courthouse or another detention center. The county is reimbursed $88 a day per detainee. Some advocates for the immigrant communities want the county to end the agreement with federal authorities. Erika Gomez Tejeda, organizing director for the Hope Community Center and one of the organizers of the Immigrants Are Welcome Here Coalition, joins Engage to discuss what she's seeing in Central Florida.
We had somebody who testified at the county commission meeting who brought her U.S. passport with her because she was afraid that she was going to get pulled over and wasn't going to have anything that identified her as a U.S. citizen. So Latinos in general are having a huge distrust and fear of racial profiling. There's been a lot of documentation across the country that's being gathered. I think the elected officials who went to the Everglades encagement last week reported that by far the majority of the folks who are at the encagement are Latinos. And so everybody's afraid. And it goes beyond citizenship. It goes beyond residency. It goes beyond protected status, right? Like everyone who is an immigrant is looking over their shoulder and wondering, what do I need to do to have due process? For the first time in my life, I also have started saving in case I need an attorney, and I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen, right? Like I haven't had to think about an immigration attorney my entire life. And here I am in my 50s, 40 years after I've been in the United States, thinking that I need to have money set aside in case I need an immigration attorney. Like, who would have thought that?
You mentioned, Erika, the Orange County policies being considered. Commissioners want to renegotiate the federal government agreement with how ICE uses the Orange County jail. Is there a version of the agreement you would support? What do you think about what commissioners decided?
I mean, What we would support is the ending of the intergovernmental services agreement, period. That would be the ideal situation. It doesn't cost the county money to do that. Right now, the county is being severely underpaid for housing people from around the country. So whether it's for the U.S. Marshals or for ICE detentions, they're not getting reimbursed. So it's the county fronting money that it doesn't have that it could be using for housing or transportation or education. So that would be the ideal situation. They gave a directive to begin the ICE side component of it. So one side is for U.S. Marshals, for folks who are arrested anywhere in the country who need to be in federal court in Orlando. That's who gets housed on the federal U.S. Marshal side. And then there's the IGSA side of the ICE alone. That allows the county to house for other counties. We basically function like a central Florida hub for immigration, and people have up to 72 hours to be held there or housed there, housed and fed. And then immigration must pick them up within a 72-hour period or they should be let go. And that's the component that was being offered as a directive that they want to modify, is like, how do they get out of the immigration business, period, because that's not what the county jail was intended for.
From one man being detained in the Everglades to the broader system overall, what do you think is important for our audience to take away from our conversation today?
We have a real human trafficking machine network that has been developed by ICE, where people are disappeared from systems. And the reason why we want the county to stop participating in that is that, let's say your son is picked up for not having documents in Tallahassee. He's going to get brought to our jail. That mom is not going to know to look for him in our jail, right? That's not going to be, oh, let me go look and see what's going on in Orange County Jail. But at least for the time that he is with the Orange County Jail, somebody can find him. And somebody is making sure that, it's not an overcrowded situation, so on and so forth. The moment that that person leaves our jail, they're lost from the system. They disappear from the system until that person finds a way to get a call somewhere. And so what that does, it places the burden on finding representation that can track you down in time to ensure that you have due process. And what is different about immigration is that it's a civil violation. So your due process is not your right to remain silent, your right to an attorney, and that's it. No, your due process depends how you came into the country, how long have you been here, what type of visa did you have, or what type of residency. Like, there are so many different processes that people don't know about, and so many protections that people are entitled to, that only an immigration attorney can say, this is what's supposed to happen to you. But they're moving people in this darkness. We were encouraged that the entire commission voted not only to reject the amendment to add transportation to their 287G agreement, but to figure out how to not participate in this human trafficking machine.
Erika Gomez Tejeda is organizing director for the Hope Community Center and one of the organizers of the Immigrants Are Welcome Here coalition. There are new developments this week to tell you about in the lawsuit filed by 5 Democratic lawmakers against the DeSantis administration over being denied entry to the Everglades Detention Center on July 3rd. State Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith is among those suing. He toured the facility on Saturday with a group of invited bipartisan lawmakers. Senator Smith joins Engage to update us on what's next for the lawsuit and being denied access to the facility.
When the Florida Division of Emergency Management refused us unannounced entry to the detention camp on July 3rd, they were actually breaking the law. Florida Statute 944.23 and 951.225, they grant elected state lawmakers the right to make unannounced visits to state prisons, to correctional institutions, and detention centers at their pleasure. That gives us, as elected lawmakers, a very important oversight authority to see conditions as they are, not as they want us to see them during a pre planned sanitized tour. It gives us the chance to talk to detainees, something denied to us this past weekend. And that's why we're suing the state in response to their unlawful refusal to let us exercise our statutory oversight authority. And we're not backing down, not with this much at stake. It was shocking that they just refused to let us in, knowing that the law is what it is on granting lawmakers access to corrections facilities and state prisons. Look, I've visited many state prisons and detention facilities during my time as an elected state lawmaker without providing notice to those who run those facilities. And I was let in without question because that is the law and that is the process. What the state is doing is illegal. We know that they're lying to us as well about who's being detained there. And it begs the question, what else are they lying to us about?
And the state Supreme Court just sent the case to a lower court. What does that mean for the lawsuit, if anything?
I think it's an indication that perhaps the state Supreme Court doesn't want to touch such a hot button issue and have to decide on a very serious matter, which is the separation of powers between the executive branch and the legislature. But it's also an indication that our case has merit and we may be right in what we're saying. That's why they didn't dismiss it altogether.
The DeSantis administration has called your lawsuit frivolous and dumb. How do you respond to that characterization?
Well, they called my last lawsuit against the state frivolous and dumb, and they were required as part of a settlement agreement to pay 100% of my attorney fees and basically do everything that we asked for. This was a COVID-19 public records lawsuit, so they don't have a great track record on this.
Senator Smith, do you think that Florida taxpayers fully understand how their money is being spent and used when it comes to immigration enforcement and the detention center in South Florida?
No, they don't. And that's why it was so important for us to visit the site, even separate from the conditions. I mean, we visited the Everglades detention camp this past Saturday, and frankly, we weren't able to see much. We were shown empty, unoccupied cages with functioning toilets that had never been used before. We were denied the ability to actually speak to detainees, which defeated the entire purpose of the visit. But that wasn't a surprise. We knew the state was going to give us a sanitized tour to show us what they wanted us to see. But one thing was made very clear from our visit. A lot of people are getting very rich from $450 million worth of no bid, multi-million dollar contracts that are being handed to GOP donors, some of DeSantis's top donors. We know the site is inhumane and un-American, not only because of the reported conditions that we were unable to inspect, things like flooding and overflowing toilets, broken air conditioners, and otherwise unsanitary conditions, but also because we know that hundreds of undocumented immigrants who haven't committed any crimes are being held there in queue for deportation. We were told that this was meant to hold the worst of the worst. That's a deliberate lie. And it's a deliberate lie being repeated by state and federal officials, which begs the question, what else are they lying about? This $450 million boondoggle shouldn't exist, and it needs to be shut down now.
What do you say to people here in Central Florida who may not think that this center, this detention facility, affects this community?
Well, it affects all of us, not only because of the cruel and inhumane conditions that detainees are being subject to in our name, but also because of the tremendous cost to the state. We have the entire division of emergency management in our state down there operating this facility, which is not their mission. Their mission is to protect Floridians from hurricanes. When we do get a storm, it's not a question of if, but when we get a hurricane or two or three or four during this hurricane season, our state's going to be caught flat-footed. Our state is too busy running a multi-million-dollar detention camp rather than actually preparing our state for what will be a very busy hurricane season. And it's not lost on me the tremendous cost here, which is totally unnecessary. We can do so much with $450 million in taxpayer money. We could hire over 8,000 public school teachers. Just imagine the problems in our community we could solve, the homeless shelters we could build, or how much in down payment assistance programs we can fund to get people into stable housing in our communities with $450 million. This tremendous cost is totally unjustified, but it is being pushed as state propaganda, not only to make DeSantis seem more relevant during his lame duck final year as governor, but literally also to enrich Republican donors and help the Republican Party of Florida make profits. They're literally selling T-shirts that say Alligator Alcatraz on it. I mean, this is disgusting, and it's un-American, and it should be shut down now.
That was Orange County Democratic State Senator Carlos Guillermo Smith. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd was appointed to the state's Immigration Enforcement Board, made up of law enforcement leaders, to advise lawmakers on enforcing federal immigration law. He joins Engage to talk about the infrastructure and policies being used to speed up removal of undocumented immigrants. Sheriff Judd, the governor has talked about building new immigration detention centers after the one in the Everglades called Alligator Alcatraz is full, possibly one at Camp Landing outside of Jacksonville. As a member of the Immigration Enforcement Council, what's your view of using these large-scale state-run facilities?
Our goal in the state of Florida is to assist ICE in deportation of those that are here in this country illegally, and to quote President Trump, starting with the worst first. Now, understand there are approximately 1.4 million extradition orders or warrants already in place. In addition to that, we have a lot of very violent, very dangerous people that we bump into as a normal course of business. Where we are at the current state prior to Alcatraz, ICE is overwhelmed. They don't have the capacity to deal with the migration back to the home countries, and they don't have the labor to do that as well. Our governor DeSantis has said, hey, Americans first, and as a result, we are going to help the federal government. That's why they stood up Alligator Alley. And I, too, have heard the same thing, that they're going to stand up another location, maybe at Camp Landing. But they're looking at other resources now, and the entire purpose of that is to help the federal government in their efforts to enforce the immigration laws of the United States.
Have you been part of conversations or heard anything about potential facilities being constructed in Central Florida?
I have not.
Sheriff, what do you say to people who are worried about the treatment of detainees, concerns being raised about sanitary conditions or them being denied due process?
Certainly. Well, there's a misunderstanding about due process. Let me deal with that first. Due process in criminal courts is different than due process of those that enter the country illegally and are cited under the civil federal laws. Due process under the federal law simply means that they have to appear before a federal magistrate or an immigration magistrate, I guess is the more appropriate terminology. So there is this illusion that people are not receiving due process, and in fact, they are. The second issue is, when you come to this country illegally, you've taken a risk because it's clearly a violation of federal law to come here inappropriately. And as a result of that, now you have a new administration that says, look, we're going to enforce the laws of the United States, and it's not all right for folks to come here illegally. What people suggest is, oh, you're treating them inhumanely. I've not been to Alligator Alley, but I can tell you this, morally, ethically, legally, I would never, ever, ever participate in a process. And I don't believe the others responsible for housing immigrants would in an environment that was not healthy and sanitary. Certainly, it's not going to be the Hilton or the Hyatt, but we must care for and make sure that they have appropriate food, clothing, housing, medical, until they can be appropriately relocated back to their home countries. I believe in that from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. And I would scream from the top of the highest mountain if I saw someone that was not being treated appropriately. But those that are in the country illegally must understand at some point in time, their number is going to come up.
That was Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd. Coming up, after a decade-long vision, a new Unity Corner is open in Winter Park as a tribute to Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. A grand opening celebration of Unity Corner at Martin Luther King Jr. Park in Winter Park was held this past weekend. It includes a large bronze statue of Dr. King and a recognition of the Black families displaced from the land in the 1950s. Jason Seeley, Parks and Rec Director for Winter Park, describes the new addition now open to visitors.
It's not just a monument or just a statue. It's more of a destination within the park. There's seating there. There's walls that kind of give it a little bit of private feel. You are standing on the corner of a fairly busy intersection, but it's pulled back, and then those walls help insulate the person when they're in there checking it out. And then within those walls, there's actually tells a story not only about Dr. King, but also about some of the local history around the park.
Longtime Winter Park resident Mary Daniels has been involved in the vision for Unity Corner for several years. She joins Engage to discuss her commitment to creating a space that captures history and inspires future generations.
In the original design, it was just a memorial for Martin Luther King. And when we were in the early planning stage, one of the residents, she mentioned to us, don't forget the people that lost their home through eminent domain and decree of condemnation. So we started looking at that and including that, and it was another young lady that did extensive research on people that lost that land. And so we had factual information and documentation from the city of Winter Park and Orange County. So we said that would be great because one of our committee members, Maria Bryant, he came up with that was one of her quotes, lost but not forgotten. And it is important for us not to forget the people who lost their property. There were people that actually lived there. That was their homes. So, it's like a vanishing community. So it's important for us to remember and not forget those people that lost their homes, not by their own choosing.
This is a project that's been going on for many years.
Ever since 2012, 2013, when the renaming of the park was finally unveiled in 2013. So it's been going on. The original plan was to have a Unity Corner there honoring Martin Luther King, but it did not have the memory wall.
How did it feel to see everything unveiled and coming together after more than a decade of working on this?
absolutely awesome. I just can't find the words to adequately describe it, and it means a lot. And it's like the ripple, a drop of water that create waves of equality, love, courage, freedom. It means a lot. It means a lot. And like equality, that's injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King quote, love. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. Courage. Courage is the power of the mind to overcome fear. And freedom. One of Martin Luther King's dreams was that his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that is so true with not only me, every person of color. And I think everyone should feel the same way regardless of what their pigmentation is. You want to be judged by your character and the content of your character, not the color of your skin.
How do you hope Unity Corner is used in the Winter Park community?
I'm praying that it's used, that it would be an inspiration for change, or inspiration. And all of Martin Luther King quotes are positive. He was a man of great faith and nonviolence, and not just for African Americans. He wanted equality, those same traits for everyone. And it means a lot. And I hope when people visit that they can feel and show real unity. So Unity Corner, so we want to see true unity. And unity encapsulate all those words. They are action words: love, diversity, inclusion. And, it's for such a time as this, we need more love. And we need to be more unified and lift each other up instead of tearing each other down.
Do you have any memories to share during the 1960s of Martin Luther King in that era?
You could say, we pretty much lived it, and seeing someone stand up for nonviolence. And through it all, all of the violence was projected on him and everyone that stood up for trying to stand up for equality. And through it all, they never fought back. Through all the jails and all the beatings and everything. So it meant a lot. He stood for it, and he tried to inspire nonviolence. And he didn't only do it with words. He walked the walk, and so did so many others. I had a church member. I think she was probably a year older than me, but she and her father, they went and they marched, and they were actually put in jail in Alabama. So it touched a lot of people, and it wasn't so much here in this area as it was in some of the other areas. But I sure do have memories of the segregation and the bigotry and the bitterness just because of the color of our skin.
How do you remember experiencing that yourself?
Through segregation, and it was my family. My parents never taught us hate, but when we would travel, you had the colored bathrooms and the dirty colored bathrooms and the colored water fountain. And so my father didn't allow us to use those bathrooms or to drink from the fountain. My mother had to pack a lunch, and he provided things for the girls to use. And he said the boys he could pull us out the road and they could do what they had to do. But they protected us. And through it all, they never really taught us hate. And we knew there were differences, and we knew there was injustice. But, we were taught love, faith, and to treat people the way we want them to treat others, like we want to be treated.
That was Winter Park resident Mary Daniels. That's all for today's edition of Engage. We want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org or send a talkback on the Central Florida Public Media app. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for joining us. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.